if that makes sense. So what does it mean to be a co-creator of reality? What does it mean when you really start to understand how powerful you are as a listener? You know, on one hand, you can look around our everyday world and you can be like, well, how many stories are coming at you that you are going to allow to take seed in you? And I'm not talking about ignoring stories. I'm not talking about the kind of fragility of don't bring your negativity into my room, or I don't want to hear things I'm afraid of. This is something else, because when you take the helm of a conscious creator and understand how powerful you are, both in what you give voice to, and both what you allow to, take seed in your being, and what you then give voice to again. Now we're all of a sudden beginning to talk about the distinction between authorship of your story, which its root term is authority, self-authority, like the connection, the etymology of all that language. So I invite you to really understand how powerful you are in your listening. And now, as storytellers, we understand that our number one task, if we really believe in the potency of our stories, that they have medicine and healing in this moment, we understand one of the most gracious things we could possibly do is prepare people to listen. And so that's actually your number one job as a storyteller, is to prepare people to catch this medicine that you've cultivated, this great gift that you've put time and consideration into forming and shaping so that it can be given away. And when you understand the value of your voice and the value of the story and the value of the medicine that you're carrying, then the least you could do is make sure that the people that you are with have that consideration to be able to catch this great gift that you're about to give. So we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that a little bit later, but it's one of the great considerations of storytelling. Janine's saying that a story is a step outside of time. Tasman is saying it's a way to make sense of the world. Gosh, yeah, we can make meaning with stories. And one of the things that I love about storytelling, and when we talk about this making sense of the world, when we talk about working with a story for tool and healing, especially around fear and anxiety, because that was one of the topics that several of you spoke to, is now we can say, okay, I'm actually gonna play with you. I'm gonna use this moment to step into a story. So the first thing I want to help you understand is one of the things that I did to help bring you forward. I exhibited two things. Now I'm going to tell you the techniques. One is I asked you to speak your name into our field. I asked you to speak your name. I actually learned that from Joe Lambert. He was one of my great teachers at the beginning. And he said, I can't ever tell a story unless I've heard everyone's name in the room. And he learned that from one of his teachers. And I think that there's just a wisdom and intelligence of calling you present, having your voice spoken in the room. And then I also gave you a job. I gave you a task. And I asked you to listen for yourself. I didn't say, listen to me, I'm going to give you all the ingredients for today, or I'm going to tell you what to do. I asked you to listen for yourself. So again, I'm doing things, and then I'm going behind the scenes and explaining some of the things that help prepare you to focus, to catch a story. And so now let's go into it. Let's talk a story. So this story came through last weekend. I was sitting with a very, very dear friend, and we started talking about the news of the day. And fear just like came rumbling in the room, and I could feel it, and I could feel what fear does to me, and it starts to constrict, and it starts to shut me down, and I start to like kind of curl into myself, and I started to want to go away, and like I know all the signs when fear comes in. And so I said, hey, could we play? And luckily I was with like a very playful person who loves to play. And I said, can we just like make a story with the fear? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. And so we did. And so this is what came forward in this 4-minute game of play. So once upon a time, not so long ago, in a land not so far away, there was a brother and a sister. And they were growing up in the Village of Joy. Now, the Village of Joy was pretty much everything you can imagine. There was dancing, there was singing, there was a lot of making yummy food and sharing yummy food. And the City of Joy, in their gardens, they grew the most exquisite, beautiful, delightfully gorgeous big sunflowers. You couldn't go by without smiling. Well, as young brothers and sisters will sometimes do as they get to a certain age, they started to wonder if this was all that there was. I mean, their parents said that this was like really as good as it got, but they couldn't believe it because they had heard a tale of some great, great, great ancestors who long ago had left the city of joy. And they wanted to know where they went since they never came back. And their parents and their grandparents had always said, don't ask, don't go there. You're in a very good place. Just stay here in this beautiful village of joy. But as young children will do, they got so curious because they'd heard that they'd been kidnapped or stolen away or some crazy thing had happened. And so they went to the old man at the edge of the town and they were like, old man, you know all the secrets and you tell us the things that no one else will tell us. So like, what's the deal? Where did all those people go? And he goes, well, and he looked around to make sure that no one was there. He's like, well, a long time ago, there were these great big black birds that no one had seen before or since, and they dropped these seeds onto our village. And in the next morning when we woke up, those seeds were seeds of fear. And they were making weird things that none of us had seen before. And some of those people in our village picked up those seeds and they ate them, and fear began to grow inside of them. And some of those people took those seeds of fear and they brought them to their house and they planted them. And their house began filled with fear. And very soon we came to understand that the two could not exist in the same place. And so we banished all of those people and all those seeds, and we've never seen them again. And he took another breath and he was going to say something else. But then he didn't. And he just told the children that they came for what they wanted. And he turned around and he closed the door to his house. Well, that night, the kids stole away in the night because they knew that over the mountain, I forgot to tell you this part, he told them that the ancestors were over the mountain across the way. So they stole away that night. They went up and over the mountain, and the next morning, just as the sun was rising, they got to the very top of the mountain, and sure enough, in the very next valley, there was this entire village that was there that they'd never known or seen. And it was, as you might imagine, the village of fear. And in their gardens, there was no big sunflowers. There was this like purpley, mucky brain-like stuff that was all just like right there, like jello brain, and there was nobody singing and there was nobody dancing and all the tables were empty. And so sure enough, they started to say, well, that doesn't look like so much fun. Maybe we don't need to go visit the village of fear. And all of a sudden, that fear, that mucky, slimy stuff that was growing in the gardens started to slime and slide its way up the mountain until it started to surround that little boy and that little girl. And they could feel the presence of fear beginning to come at them. And they were having a hard time breathing. And they got frozen in their space. And they could barely move. And all of a sudden, the little girl remembered. Her great-great-great-grandmother had been through the experience of surviving fear once before. And she wanted to make sure that if anyone in her family or lineage was ever exposed to such a thing, that they would know what to do. And she was so very passionate about making sure that her great ancestors would have this information that she carved it into their kitchen floor so that no one would ever be able to forget. And so in that moment, the great-great-great-granddaughter remembered what her ancestor had led for her to survive such a moment. And she looked at her brother and she said, "Bok, bok, 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 chicken!" And he started to laugh and she started to laugh. And they started to laugh so hard that the sunflowers of joy started to sprout all around them. And all of that mucky, gross, slimy fear just dried up. And as it dried up all the way down the mountain, all the way down the gardens, and all the fear evaporated. And the brother and sister danced with joy and delight, and they placed their hands on the faces of those sunflowers, and they said, "Thank you." And then they cut the stalks of those great big sunflowers, and they filled their arms with them, and they walked down that hill to the village where fear had once lived. And as all the people began to emerge out of the spell that had been cast on them, the children handed each one of them a sunflower so that they could remember where they'd come from and that they were always welcome home. And that is your story of how joy met fear. And so that's a small, short example of how do we play with these energies? How do we engage this energy of playing where we give them a voice and we give them a place and we can see them and name what they do, but also just in the alchemical process of a storyteller bringing a different kind of energy into the room, giving people an extra tool to play with. So perhaps if fear and anxiety are at your doorstep right now, and you want to engage that energy of play, or you just want to have a little wondering, how do I work with fear? What would be my story of fear? How can I play with that? And it really can be as simple as just asking the question, how do I play with fear? And see what story wants to arrive in your presence, and then trust it. When we do this, it's like we didn't set out. When John and I were sitting there and we're like, well, how do we deal with the fear that I want to die from right now? It was just a pure question, and then following these two children that showed up and their adventures in life. Who knew that the story of fear was going to start in the town of joy? And so allowing the story to keep coming and revealing and to reveal itself to you. And so now you might be catching the scent of what is a sacred story, right? Because this was a story that we created with intention. We didn't say we're going to create a story and then spread and then build fear and make fear and spread fear, right? No, we were like, oh no, we went in with the intention of a story to heal the anxiety and the fear that we were both feeling in the room that day. So let's kind of play at this game. I'm sorry I'm not getting to everyone's here. Janet's saying that a story is a retelling of an expression of an experience, either physical or mystical, that invites the listener to imagine and understand, right? There's this other piece of understanding. And Ella's saying it's concrete metaphorical narration of an experience, right? And what is metaphor? But it's the language of spirit. Or you could even go so far as to say it's the language of the earth speaking out loud. Mel says that it's sharing experience to expand perspectives, right? So it gives us more variety of things to say. Aaliyah, I hope I'm saying her name right, is that it's not a human experience, it's a magical imagination involved with a God story. Right? And Kati is saying it's a story, it's what one's mind is telling about something, internal or external in the world. Right. So it's like one of the things that I understand about a story, and these are all such beautiful poetic expressions, and thank you, Kati, for reminding me to speak to this part. If I was to speak in a very unpoetic expression of what a story is, I would say that a story is an operating system. And it's an operating system where we learn our beliefs, our values, and what we believe is possible. So I invite you just to take a look around and say, okay, now what are all the stories that you grew up with? Even I love this, we call the TV shows programming, right? So it's like, where do we learn, what are some of our first images of what to expect from life? Hollywood, television, but also, children's stories, but also the families that our stories tell to us about where we came from, and begin to shape perhaps our expectation of where we're going to go. And then is there a moment when you break out of that story? Or do you choose that story? I always say, if you're not clearly determining your own story, you could very easily end up playing a part in someone else's story. So this is where, again, we're taking our place at the throne of being conscious creators. Do I choose to co-create the story with what are the expectations of women or Americans or whatever in this time? Or do I choose to consciously create a different kind of story? And as I speak this kind of story, do I enroll people, and what roles do they play in that story? So, thank you, Kati, for giving me a little bit of guidance on. I think if I mute myself, though, I will mute myself, and then you won't be able to hear me either. It's kind of a mess that way. Okay, so let's talk about what is a sacred story. If we get to that, what is an actual sacred story? What's the distinction? Oh, I love Miriam as asking, what would I engraved on the kitchen floor myself? What I love about that part of the story, is that, you're expecting, you're expecting some kind of deep, wise wisdom. I would, but when the story emerged, and really the story just led us right to that point, and then it showed Chicken, what I heard in that was, oh, this is old wisdom, that humor and lightness and frivolity can change the shape and energy of anything. And that in those moments when we think all is lost, can we invite another way that gives us another way to think about the situation, and can we invite another way of being in it? Carolyn Casey tells this amazing story about this journalist that was captured. He was in the Middle East at the time. And he had just had some other friends who were journalists that were kidnapped and murdered. So this is the story that he's carrying. He understands that when he got kidnapped, this is a life or death situation. And something in him snapped into a kind of genius. And I love these kinds of moments and how to trust them. And he decided just to kind of change the narrative. And he started looking to his prison guard, and he started thanking him profusely for protecting him because it was so dangerous out there. So he changed the role. This guy was no longer his kidnapper and the person who was, could murder him. He had given this man another role to play and had offered him the role of protector. And he said, thank you so much for protecting me. Thank you so much for keeping me safe. And eventually this man was released to tell the story. And on the way out, the guards even spoke to their commitment to keep him safe. Strange but true. So I invite you in these, in these listenings, in these stories, when we tell these old stories, and we even tell, Joseph Campbell said the new myths would arrive, they would come. And so we also, and going to talk about a sacred story, but we also want to talk about like, what is a myth? So let's keep some order. What is it? What is a sacred story? Who here knows what a sacred story is, or has an idea or a wondering or a moment of eloquence? What is a sacred story? I know we've got some ringers in the room who know what a sacred story is. You're being quiet. Darla is playing, is it your truth or the truth? Oh gosh, truth. That is a dangerous term if I've ever heard one. Did you know that truth is actually from carpentry? The etymology of that, and it speaks about a straight line, being able to see a straight line. I'm not going to pick that one up. Tasman is saying it's spirit coming through the teller, right? So there's a life force that, as the teller, you're this conduit, right? There's this life force that comes through. And, when you watch people, I really invite you to become students, scholars of watching different people talk story and seeing what happens. Are they giving you energy? Is there something that is just flowing through them, or are they sucking energy out of the room and just putting off a lot of glamour? And you'll start to feel, if you get to attune your own awareness and presence around your of understanding, is this a story I want to take on or not? You'll understand, like, how do I feel in this presence? Do I feel more alive with my own life force, or am I starting to put this person up on a pedestal? I've noticed that when I start to find myself putting myself up on a pedestal, I'm like, oh, they're casting a little bit of a spell over here. And there's a bit of glamour involved. And they're telling me the story of lack of equality. Is that the world I want to live in? So, again, I really invite you to become so attuned and astute at watching and learning and paying attention to what is happening in you and your body and your resonance, and how attuned can you be watching the layers of your own consciousness as you receive these stories. Maggie saying that sacred stories take you to numinous realms. I love that word. A holy place where the quality of awe, I love that, and of something bigger arises. I like to use the word wholeness. That a sacred story makes space for wholeness, where we get out of the story of good and bad, right and wrong, you know, and that we can all of a sudden, we can take someone who's a bad guy, and we can go and flip them into the master teacher. And now we don't have an adversary anymore. We don't have someone that's forcing us to be small, or trying to damage or harm us, right? With that simple slip of a move, now they're here in service to us. They're calling out our strength, our boundaries, our courage, our truth. So to me, a sacred story, it's that piece that creates more space for the allness, the truth of all of what we are. We all have, all the archetypes live in us. We're all the lover and the murderer. It's all potential about what gets activated. So I'm going to read one more of these, and it says, Philippe saying, I would say alchemy through narrated beautification of circumstances, events. He's talking about, he got so bold as to speak to beautify the beauty and the role of beauty in stories. And I really appreciate this being said. And I feel like as storytellers, we get to bring beauty into the room. What does beauty do? But it feeds the soul. And when we look at times that are feeling rather dire and gloomy, and where there's so much mystery, there's so much unknown, there's so much fear, what can you bring into the room that would feed and nourish the soul, that it has the courage and the strength to face these times? And I believe in all of my being that beauty is one of those things that we do. And it's not just in how we dress, but it's in how we create an experience for other people. And it's the kind of stories that we tell. So thank you for saying that, or bringing that forward. And so, you've all said it, but I'm going to say it again. What I understand a sacred story to be is that it has that life force in it, and that life force it can go by many names. You might know it as the divine. You might know it as the muse, or the ancestors, or the earth speaking out loud. But it's got that piece of inspiration. So when we're working with a sacred story, again, it comes with also the intention. I understand a sacred story is something that is here to support life thriving. It has a task. And so what's the flip side of a sacred story? I would call it a zombie story. This is a story that might be on the take. You want to know what it's in service to. Is it designed to manipulate or maneuver? And it's not here to serve all life thriving. So a quick, very, very quick example could be, and I invite you, like every time you watch TV or every time you watch a movie, at the end, just check in and be like, was that a sacred story? Was it not a sacred story? You can watch a story about the Holocaust, and it can be a sacred story. It could feed and nourish and bring beauty and poetry. So it's not about not looking at pretty things. It's about what is that story here to do. So Jaws, okay, we're going to look at the creators in terms of what a zombie story is. We have Peter Benchley, which was the creator of that story, and I don't know his story about that. I do know that Steven Spielberg was the director and producer of that, and I don't know if he was the producer, but he directed it. It was his first movie, and so again, what do we look at? What are people in service to? We know Steven Spielberg, he wanted to become a great, famous director, and so he had a good eye for content. What would make people look? And they went out, and we look at how the film was made, and they were on the fly. They were changing the script every day. That was the first film ever made on the open ocean. Okay, and their big metal shark broke, and they were really smart filmmakers, and they changed and redesigned, and so they just showed fragments of the shark. What does this do to the person that's taking on the story? Well, first of all, whether or not you consciously or intentionally speak the language of symbol, it is the oldest language that is inside of all of us humans. It was our first language. So ocean, what we understand is that it represents our consciousness. You know, what happens when you take the story about a shark and we've seen just pieces of it and it's right there in our consciousness, and that shark represents our fear of death and our fear of the unknown? What happened in our collective consciousness from the impact of that story is that it became fully acceptable. The amount of fear that came through about sharks. I believe that there's a statistic that says that more people each year get killed by coconuts falling out of trees than by shark attacks. The amount of fear that came through and the level of acceptance to kill off this keystone species that is actually we are dependent on for our own health and wellness, for a healthy ocean system. When Peter Benchley discovered the impact and influence and the unintended impact and influence of his film, he spent the rest of his life working as an ocean steward and ocean protector. So I say this as a cautionary tale because I don't think that a lot of people are out there trying to make zombie stories out to do harm. But I think that it is worthy, if you feel yourself called to tell stories, to really ask yourself, what does it mean to be a conscious creator, and to understand your impact and influence, and that your stories might end up getting carried far past your lifetime. So now we kind of enter into the realm of myth. What is a myth? What is a myth? So a myth is a story that has no author. It is a wild, free agent. It has not been captured and enslaved by words to be repeated in the same way, doing the same task over and over and over again. Every indigenous culture around the globe has their myths and their creation myths, their origin stories about how to understand how the world came into being. And when you start to study the myths, you'll start to understand that many of the same myths live in different cultures, told in slightly different ways. And Sean Kane, who wrote Wisdom of the Myth Teller, a profound book if you really want to understand and go into the depths of mythology, says that, has this idea that myths are really the earth speaking out loud. And Joseph Campbell said that it would be our job to listen for the mythology, the myths of our time. So there's, if you, inherently by the definition, if you write a mythic story and place your name by it, it's not a myth anymore, right? It's been claimed. But it doesn't mean that we can't continue to capture the myths of our time. It doesn't mean that we can't capture mythic stories. And what I understand is as storytellers and working in the mythic dimension, if you play by this, again, like what reality do you live in? But if you live in the reality that there's multi-dimensions happening at once, that this is one dimension that we're in, but as storytellers, we can see through them. We can see those things that can't be seen. No one really understands our imagination. It's so amazing. So it's like, what are you seeing? Where are you traveling when you see those things? And as storytellers, we can bring these things from other dimensions, give them word, give them language, give them meaning, and we bring them into being when we start to speak them out loud into this place. It's a wild, wild role to play in the world. So that's one way to start thinking about myth. And then you start thinking about what is your personal myth, and what is your personal mythos. And we can talk a little bit more about that. So that is that's kind of your kind of intro, your basic intro to storytelling as a sacred art form. And if you have any questions, I will definitely stay here and be alive with your questions. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to receive any questions that you have. Then I'm going to close this out with a quote. And then for those who are interested, I'm doing something I've never done before, but I'm just hosting office hours. And a lot has happened because I've been teaching a lot of different classes, and I wanted just to make space for people who are in those classes just to come and ask any questions that they wanted to. I'm in between classes right now, but if you have questions about story, and I'm also going to talk about 3 upcoming programs that are coming up. And so I'll start talking about that at 11. But until then, let's hear questions if they're there, and then I'll read you a quote, and then whatever is wanted will happen next. Could you speak on a personal myth briefly? Asked Mel. You mean like what is a personal myth? Is that what you mean? Just want to make sure that I understand the question. Yes. Okay. I'm seeing a nod. Okay. So now you're going to lead me right into a class that I'm teaching. Which I wasn't going to quite do that right now, but I'll tell you. So, what is a personal myth? It's like we have our personal mythology, and whether we're consciously doing it or not, what roles do you play in your life, or what role are you expected to play? Are you waiting for that moment when your prince is going to come, your king is going to come, and then you're going to go live happily ever after? And so, are you living in sort of like a falsified mythology that's been, and it's kind of hard to avoid in many of the people that times that I grew up in, and probably times that you guys grew up in. But do you have also a mythology? I just spoke to this woman, and she's a warrior. You know, she works. I'm not going to talk about what she works on in politics because that would bring us into a political conversation. I don't want to do that. But what she does, she is so fierce, and she is such a warrior. And as we're talking, it became so clear. I said, you could be a warrior on this issue, but you're a warrior. You would be a warrior wherever you go. Whatever you do, that energy of being a warrior is inside of you. So when we understand our personal mythos and we understand, and we can get real clear about it, it's not like literally the story that we inherited. Some of us might have very big stories, big family stories, and part of our mythos might be connected to that. But also part of your mythos might be, what's your soul contract? What did you come to this life to do? And maybe some of you can feel it, and maybe some of you can feel it kind of tapping at you, and that's part of your mythos. Another part of your mythos would be to understand what were the gifts that you came to bring, and sometimes those gifts aren't recognized in a consumer-based reality, right? In a capitalistic, so we don't have a name for them and a way for them to be honored. What I love about taking our story and placing it into the mythic dimension is that all of a sudden they can be named and claimed. I just spoke to this man and he said, I shine gems. I'm a gem shiner. Gem shiner. He's like, I can find them when they're all rough. And I work with people and I help them shine their inner gems. And that's my role in the world. He works in finance, just so you know. So it's like, that's the distinction of someone who is, like they can work in one way in this dimension. And when you understand your personal mythos, and then when you understand it, it can amplify and it can be more activated and it can come through your life even more. Did I answer your question, Mel, in terms of understanding your personal myth? Great. What I will say is that I have a class coming up, and I'll put you the link here. But before I start talking about classes, I really do want to honor. Are there any other questions that people have? And then I'll place those links. Okay. Let me give you a quote to send those who feel complete. I will give you a quote, and then those who want to learn more, I'm going to stay on and I'm going to talk a little bit more. This is one of my favorite quotes on the planet. It's just so delicious. I read it over and over and over again. Act as if you're a people of consequence so that I can treat you as such and that you matter. What must have happened to people who unconsciously agreed that the best presence in this world is to have no consequence of this world? It's a velvet gauntlet, this idea of being of consequence. It doesn't clink when it hits the ground, but you can feel it. It would be proper to proceed that there is consequence to us being here. And that is by Stephen Jenkinson, that quote. And if you aren't familiar with his work, you might want to enjoy looking at Orphan Wisdom School and receiving his teachings on grief and what it means to be alive in these times. So for those of you who feel complete, farewell, that was our class. And then for those who want to learn a little bit more about what is coming up or just have some open questions, stick around and we'll do that. And I'm seeing Miriam have a question, which she's saying that she's a singer and performer who wants to incorporate storytelling into performances. Where do I start with choosing the right stories? You're welcome, Cindy. where to begin with choosing the right stories. I like go to the stories, like ask the question. It's kind of amazing. That simple act of just asking the question, it's like all of a sudden the stories will start coming to you. You know, it's really, and another way of looking at it is what are the things that you care most about? What's your medicine? Here's another way of answering that question. What is your medicine? And here's a great exercise that we do in a lot of our classes, which is, medicine. Some people kind of get triggered by that language. I mean it much more the indigenous term of, what is the unique gift that wants to come through you is another piece. And so you might just know, oh, I've got love medicine. I love people to feel loved in my presence, and so I want to bring stories of love through. But, it doesn't have to mean it's a romantic love story, right? It could be a story between a cat and a dog, who fall madly in love, So what I would do, and if you, again, are in that question of what are the stories that want to come through me, I do think that getting a sense of, you can just ask and you can start reading lots of stories. You can start listening. They'll start coming to you. Um, and then you can also just kind of go to that question of what is the essence that wants to come through me? It's a little bit like wagging the dog. And if you want to do a fun exercise, you can go to a couple of different people in your life and you can just say, hey, what's my medicine to you? What happens when I walk in the room? What do you feel? And sometimes, amazingly enough, people will say, they'll actually start telling you what happens in that space. And that will start to reveal to you what your medicine is, if they feel calm or if they feel nourished or if they feel inspired. These are all hints to your medicine. And the more clear you are, the more amplified it becomes as you speak and tell your stories. So here is what I'm going to give you, is Mythos. It's a link to the class that I just spoke about. I think it starts next week on September 8th. It's a 4-week class. And Mythos is really, it's kind of a total pleasure. For me, it's like a gem course. It's like my favorite place to play is in people's personal mythos. And so what you learn in this class, what you get to experience is you'll get to experience, how is your world playing out in the mythic dimension. So you're going to really get to play with your mythic imagination. So we're not doing like a literal narration of, I was born here, I did this, I do that, this is my life purpose. That is not what this class is. We're going into like the biggest story that you have, which is the story of your soul, the story of what you came here to do. And it's not about knowing the story before you come. It's really about being able to go enter into that place of awe and mystery and wonder and collaboration with the life force of your story. So when we talk about sacred storytelling, and that a sacred story has a life force in it that you collaborate with, that you can listen to, it's calling forth that story and coming into relationship with it, and really allowing, through a bunch of series of exercises, getting to practice that game of listening to that creative life force, collaborating with it, and allowing it to reveal, and also allowing to kind of, there's certain things that you do know, and giving them a place and a way to be named and claimed that might be bigger, have the more wholeness of their expression that can be just expressed in our day-to-day existence, if that makes sense. A little esoteric. Thanks for hanging in with that. But if you have any other questions, I can explain more about that. Um, uh, how do I tell from a new perspective? Yes. I think, when we talk to stories from a different perspective, it's one of the most powerful things that we can do. And I have a course it's called Tell a Bigger Story, and it's literally about working with trauma stories. So people who really want to take on working with story as a healing modality. That is one of the most powerful things you can do, is take a traumatic event and place it into a mythic dimension. And now you can start to see it from so many different perspectives. And again, now you get to see it from a lot of different ways. And you also get to see it not from the person who experienced it, but from someone who's now integrating and alchemizing the experience, that's living the medicine from the experience. And so it's working with story in that way, I think, is one of the most potent ways that I understand about working with story as a healing modality. Um, teasing, I'm teaching a digital storytelling class. Yay. I would love to get some recommendations from you would be better. Yes, you can do that. You also might, I'm sure you probably know about the Story Center. I think they literally like invented digital storytelling and the whole process of it. And so Joe Lambert founded that, and he could definitely talk to a lot more of the technical parts of it than I could. And do I have a book with story recipes? I do have a book with story recipes. I literally have 5 story recipes. I love that you use the word recipes. Rather than I say instructions or guidelines, I say recipes because I don't follow recipes very well, but they serve as great inspiration, and they give you everything you need to make it from A to Z and have a great meal. And so I do have an ebook, and I would have to find it. But well, what I'll do is I'll put the ebook with the with the recipes in the email, the replay email for you, so that you can get that. I'll make a little note for me. Any questions that you have about Mythos? Is anyone curious about that? And I can tell you guys about 2 other programs that are coming alive right now. Okay. So there's another program that is happening right now, which I am unbelievably excited about. And this program is called Artemis. And this is, it's an advanced program for students who really know that they want to, like, I have 2 different programs. So I have my basic introductory program, which I'll also tell you about, which is a School of Sacred Storytelling. And this is really for people who know that they want to learn about story, that they're curious, that they're filled with wonder, they want to come join a community. And in the School of Sacred Storytelling, we do this process called going into sanctuary. Sorry, I interrupted. I'm going to tell you about the school, and then I'll tell you about the advanced program. I was going backwards. And so in the School of Sacred Storytelling, the way that it works is that you have, it's completely based on the flow of nature, which has an ebb and flow nature. And so we begin by going in, and the first class is called Sanctuary, and it's where you get to go in and really learn about who you are as a creator, and understand that entire process. And understand what's your creator matrix, in terms of what's your operating system, what did you come here to create, and what are your gifts, like your just natural born gifts, but also what are those barriers that prevent you from getting it out in an easeful way. And so this is a 6 weeks class called Sanctuary, and we just finished. It was so much fun. It was truly unbearably delightful. And in this class, we also integrate ritual, ceremony. You learn about prayer. You learn about a lot of the ancient techniques of what does it mean to be a storyteller and how it's interwoven into all these elements. And one of the key parts of this course is actually getting to transform a room in your house into an physically embodied sanctuary. And as you do that, you get to see through a physical exercise how you create and what you create, and what really works and what doesn't work. And the reason why I created a course like this is because I've been, a professional creator for over 20 years. And there are certain things that I could kind of sense or I could feel, but I still didn't know. And then all of a sudden I did this exercise, and it was almost frustrating, where all of a sudden over the course of 2 days, I saw my biggest barrier because it was showing up in physical form right there, and there was no hiding. So it was really kind of, and I was like, oh my God, I can't keep this a secret. I just want to share this with everyone so that they don't have to wait 20 years to figure out that one piece. So it comes with that class, Sanctuary, comes with a 100-page guide, and there's also leads you through a very systematic approach of how to capture we call it psychic silence, what's living in your psychic space, which also informs what kind of stories that you make. And we have a whole process for how to clear that so that you can become a super clear channel. So that is Sanctuary. That's the introductory class to the entire year. Then right after that, we come out and we do mythos. So we did that first introductory class, and that mythos. So once you understand who you are as a creator, and once you've cleaned house and you're really ready to play and your channel's already, then we start really calling in that energy of calling in the muse, calling in that creative life force to come into, okay, now what is your personal mythos? What is your personal narrative as you take the helm of a sacred storyteller, conscious creator? And then from there, we actually go back in and we dive back into another sanctuary. So that's the ebb and flow. We go in, we hibernate, we reflect, we restore, and we come out to give the gift. So what's really important for me in terms of this work is that it's there's definitely a lot of self. You get to learn a lot about yourself in it. You get to have a lot of fun with community, but it's not just about here or being in your home or being with these people. It's really about how do you bring it into the world and how do you bring it into our times. And so that's a real mission of this class, and it gives you a lot of different ways to play at that. We go back into sanctuary and we look at stories of power and purpose. So really looking at, okay, now we're going in to really explore your entire landscape around power and purpose. How do you source power? How do you lose power? What's your relationship to power? And then how does that come through, and how is that being demonstrated through the way that you're expressing your purpose in life? So the less answers you have, I think the easier it is sometimes when we come into these kinds of things and we come out to tell our wisdom stories. These are like, when sometimes I say wisdom stories and people get all like, I don't know the wisdom stories. Of course you do. Of course you do. So this is an opportunity where we go in and we find those in that sanctuary, we bring them out, we prepare them, and then in the wisdom story section, we prepare that part so that they can be really told. So in the teaching, in the story sections, I call those story skill building, like mythos, like wisdom stories, like teaching stories. You get to really cultivate your writing skills, your telling skills. It's much more focused on telling than writing. Let's say, the performance skills, you'll get some coaching and feedback on how you present. And these are really designed to be supportive, fun, playful environments that really make it a fun place to play. And so I'm not going to drop a link to the School of Sacred Arts, but I'll send it to you guys in the email. It's going to go out afterwards. And then for those who really are onto it, they're like, this whole thing of working with story as a tool for self-awareness, for healing both the individual and the collective, for really bringing medicine to the times that we're in, who are walking towards taking a position of leadership in facilitation, and really want to either integrate this into their practice or into their life or into their community or into their families. I have a program that's called Artemis. And Artemis is a program that it's actually designed for just a few people, so no more than 13 people will be attending. And we have Artemis as our archetypal leader in this course, because it is that one that both integrates the masculine and the feminine. It is the warrior and the protector of those who can't protect themselves. It is the archetype of the midwife. So you can say all of that in terms of old story, and you can say, here we are at a time when so much of the world is calling for those who are taking a stand as protectors, who are taking a stand as being midwife for the new story. And so we're really looking at that as our guiding force as we come forward. And then I forgot to ask, I'm so sorry. Did anyone have questions so far about the School of Sacred Arts or Sanctuary before I can just keep rambling? It's horrible. No. Okay. Usually I look at you, and if you're just all nodding, I'm assuming you're getting it. And if one of you gets a glazed look or you start to cock your head, I know that there's a question. But by all means, please ask. The link for the website for Sanctuary is not working. I can't believe that. Hold on. Let me get it out for you again.
Okay, I've unmuted myself. So I love all the courses, and it's hard for me to choose, because on some level I resonate with each and every one of them.
Uh-huh.
And I tend to jump into the deep end, but my sense is that probably I should begin with the beginning one, School of the Sacred Stories, and that's 6 weeks. Even though I was sort of ready to jump into into the mythos story. So yeah, I'm still sort of twixt and between where to dive in.
Right.
But the calling into storytelling, I already have a platform where I've started telling stories, as I teach these relaxation classes, and then we come to a part and it's like, now we're going to story time, and everybody's going, oh yay, it's story time, you know. And so I really am looking for material and more authentic ways to
Hmm.
bring in the value of storytelling that goes straight to the heart.
Well, here's what I can tell you in terms of your question about like where to begin in terms of sanctuary or mythos. And what I would say is there sanctuary is just designed to be an introductory course to my approach to sacred storytelling in general. So you can always start there. But it's not, believe it or not, a storytelling class. This is a getting to know who you are as a creator class. And so it'll give you all those skills to it'll give you so many skills to harvest. What stories are yours to tell? You know, in terms of if you're like, I am just ready to dive in and I just want to tell a story and I want some coaching and I want to come out with a completed story, then mythos will be your way to play. Bye, Mel. Good to see you too. I don't know if she's
Thank
gone.
you. That helps me a lot.
Okay,
Great.
great. I put in the link to Artemis. Any other questions right now? I think that's such a, I always, people are often like, oh my God, you offer so many things. Where do I begin? And I really like hearing what you're looking for because I can help navigate you. Okay. I'm going to talk to you about Artemis now. And so for Artemis, what that is this is an advanced class, as I said. It's for a much smaller group. And this class is designed for um, people who want to step into leadership. And the way that the class works is that we meet over the course of 13 months, so it's a real commitment. We meet twice a month, and we meet one time as a small group, um, and we meet in that way for a full day. And it's over Zoom, but we will not look at Zoom all day. That's the one thing I can promise to you. So this is an opportunity where we will spend the whole day in a held container. And I've been doing this now for a while, holding these full days courses. And at first I was terrified. It's kind of amazing how fast it goes because you have a lot of time to work on your own, have a really specific chunk of time to really dive in. So if you're that person that doesn't have enough time on your own to get into your things, here you have this protected time where you'll get to really create, and you'll have direct connection and feedback in terms of what is coming alive, and get some feedback on it, and then we'll continue on. And so in that course, we're doing a couple of different things. We're working with story and studying story in a different way, where each season we have a different story that's our guide and guiding us through the seasons. This is a very old way of being with stories when you actually get to be lived by a story. Oh my God, it's Celia Ilario in the house. Celia is going to be one of our guest teachers later in the year. I'm so excited. Um, and so you'll get to know these old stories in a way that you might not be used to, and so it's a way of really getting in deep, really super deep with an old story. The other thing that we'll be doing is we'll be working with, again, coming to that position of service. So we'll be listening for what is the story that wants to be told in our times to our collective that would be really of service. And as a group, we're going to decide on that, and we're going to develop what's called a story ceremony. And we did this with a group of over 200 people in Berkeley back in the day, back literally right before COVID, and worked with the story of Medea and ended up doing a massive forgiveness ceremony with 200 people. And so it was an extraordinary experience to work as story as a way that calls us together. It gives us a way of examining some of these old, old, old stories that live among us, around us, and through us. And how do we transmute and transform that energy through working with our collective? So it's hard to explain unless you're in it. And nope, we've never done this online before. And so it's definitely going to be an experiment. Um, and then the final thing that in terms of Artemis, is you'll have an opportunity to work on your own private story, your own personal story. And we'll also have an opportunity to do some kind of story project in your own community. So I really do think storytelling was not meant for Zoom. It was really meant to be done in person. And so, what does that mean to be in times of COVID? People that are holding the helm of story. How do we do it in a really responsible way? How do we give people an opportunity to come together through story? And so, we'll have an opportunity to really see what wants to come through your unique being through the form of story and hone and create your own project. So, the other part of that that I would say is that oh, you get one private session. So for Artemis, that's one of the pieces of that is that you get one private session for that. And that what I was going to say is that for people who really feel called to this work and are saying, I actually really want to commit these next 9 months or these next 13 months to an entire program. And one of the things that it's, as we all look at these times in the world and with all the mystery and all the unexpected things, it's like, what do you want that's going to hold you through that? What kind of experience and community? What do you want to be doing in your own work? And so I think it's the kind of the big question that we're all asking, what's going to hold us through these times? And I would say that this program really and truly, from the bottom of my heart, was designed to, in the way of flow, to really say, okay, what will support people thriving in these times? What will give us an opportunity to alchemize everything that's coming at us in a way that we can make meaning, explore play, and be a gift to not only ourselves, but also to those around us in terms of what comes through us in the expression of it. And so if you feel like you're like, yes, I'm in, I encourage you by saying, if you want to register for the School of Sacred Arts, you can do the whole thing and get a great big discount. You can do payment plans according to what works for you. And for everyone who registers by tomorrow, I do a great big bonus and I offer you a free 1-hour coaching session. So that's if you just think that you know that it's yours, that's the bonus to register by tomorrow. And Tasman's saying, okay, yeah, this is the only thing with that long course. I do have a woman there's a woman from Australia who's an Artemis. And she wakes up at 3 a.m. to come to these classes. And she just blows my mind. She's been doing this for the past year. So it starts at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and I literally do all my classes at 10 a.m. to get as many time zones available as possible. So, and it goes till I think 5 or 6 in the evening. So it's a full day. Any other questions that people have? Okay. I can't talk randomly without questions. I think I've said it all. Okay. Celia, what brings you to us today?
Well, it's hard to resist office hours for story goddess that you are. And I mean, I wasn't sure if it was like presentation, if we could bring questions, if we
Yeah.
needed something workshop. So there's an alchemic or sort of a magical shift that I need your advice and support around.
Okay.
Having been conditioned as a communicator and a media person in social movements, I came up in the school of like, we're just going to bombard people with charts and graphs and just tell them the truth and just smother them in the reality. And then like, there'll be some awesome shift and psychic break and everything will be groovy. And of course that doesn't work. And also the burden, the heaviness of all of these things we're living in the same time right now are just impossible for any human to bear alone. So there's this piece around living into a new story regardless of the evidence, or living into a new story even when it's really hard to visualize it or whatever. And there's a jump there that I'm trying to trust myself as a storyteller to make, to be able to just trust that there's a way that isn't all facts and figures and isn't charts and graphs, that there's a way to trust myself, but also trust the people who are receiving the story gift, so that we can actually jump this hurdle and imagine healing. Imagine a post-COVID time, a post-pandemic time. Imagine the good stuff. And I notice myself getting stuck. It reminds me of like when you see someone who's just learning to hurdle and they like run in this great stride and then right before the hurdle they like stop and kind of like boop, kind of stutter step. So that was my question that I was bringing to office hours, Professor, is sort of like what tips, love tips do you have for us as story keepers and storytellers to not get stuck because our own imagination is stretched to see the beauty that we're calling forth with the story.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little tidbit
Cool.
for
I love it. Okay,
just a minute or two on that.
I'll
Question
rip with
3
you.
on page 7,
I'll rip with you. I'll rip with you. So, Celia, so just a little behind the scenes. Celia is one of my dearest, closest friends, and she's also been one of chief collaborators and troublemakers. And we've gotten to work on some really amazing things in the environmental space together. And I'll tell you, at the beginning of the talk, I did a whole spiel on how um, I feel like we in the environmental movement went a little left of center. Not just didn't know, just didn't understand that the science is that like right. You just talked about the heaviness that happens in the room. We're like, okay, we're just going to give you the information so that you know what to do with it, right? And then so many of us did that. We felt all the energy go woof. And after being in a bunch of rooms, I was like, wait, what's going on here? And then I started to actually study it. And what happens is that humans actually can't metabolize information. Like we just can't, there's nothing that we can do with it. Plus, it doesn't tell us what role to play. So here's, I would say, like one of the key things around the narrative is that it doesn't give us a part in the story to play. And I would say, as climate narrative people, that's one of the biggest things that might be in our way is that we've made the data the story rather than cast data as a part in the story. So it's basically is that we're not giving people a whole an experience of wholeness. And it's like through that story of data and all of that, we're actually like we're doing probably one of the worst things is we're separating us off from our environment and creating a story of disconnection just through the expression of it. So I'll just riff and wonder with you because here it's like part of it is like right, what do we do and we can't even imagine? And I love what Paul Hawkins doing with Project Drawdown, which is like they're saying, hey, we have all the numbers, all the projected numbers of if things go wrong, but why don't we have all the projected numbers if everything goes right? So I think that could be like one of the first games to play is show that people like that's all a projection. Let's just call that what it is. It's not real. This is real, so help people like grasp that because I think so many of us have had those images implanted into our minds and we can't help but co-create them. So it's like how do we bring it back and say, okay, how can I plant the image based on your facts and information, your stats that you trust so much? So coming back to what do people trust, and we still do, strangely enough, trust facts. You're welcome, Tasman. And then, and so I think also, it's funny because we can't take people into a mythic story if they don't trust mythic story. So if we tell them the story of utopia, people sometimes don't trust utopia, right? But what if they are part of building the story themselves? And I think just actively putting people into the position um, of working out the muscle of imagination. I think we live in a culture that does not support the muscle of imagination because we're just being fed so many, it's like popcorn and candy, cotton candy all day long. And so helping people come to the place of imagining what's the world that you most want to live in, like what does it look like, when your mornings are like, can you just visualize it? And I actually think that could be some of the best work is giving people that and then saying what would need to change for that to happen. And so all of a sudden, like what is it to help people come into the process of co-creating a story? So I feel like if we just paint the story of the world that we most want to live in, people won't believe it and they won't take it. But if they're part of actively making it, that's what comes up.
Can I ask you one more follow-up question? I had an appointment at this time that canceled, which allowed me to be with you, and I was so glad. What are some things that you do for yourself maybe this never happens to you, but if you're ever having, or you're helping someone who's having a challenge, tapping into that imagination and that possibility, like you were talking about the cat caught. So like, you got to stop eating the junk food, right? What's the meal? What do you prepare? How do you find the right nutrition, or what do you actually do for yourself to re-engage that if it ever falls away or feels distant? Imagination.
Literally just working with imagination.
Hmm.
Um, I think one of the biggest exercises that you can do, honestly, it's because imagination is about trusting intuition, and imagination is about opening to inspiration. It's about opening to the muse, or you could even go so far. It's about opening to the ancestors, or it's opening to listen to the unseen world. And so, and in order to tap your imagination, there's the first thing is what's your listening like? Can you get outside of thinking that you have to know the answer? So we just played a game before about talking about telling a story of fear, and it's like if I this story of fear, because I was getting so struck by the fear. Like I was with my friend and we were talking about the news and the whole shutdown happens, and I was like, well, can we just play with some fear? Like, can we just make a story around fear and have some fun and invite fun and play into the room and not get so taken by it? And so luckily he's willing to play. And so what do we do? But I opened to see like what's the story, and the Village of Joy shows up. Now, have I been planning or strategizing my technique for how to tell a story that would help you with your fear? I don't know that it would have started in the Village of Joy. But and I feel like when you come to working with story and you're inviting that sacred presence, the divinity, the life force in it, it's a very humble process. And it's like you get to sit, you don't have to be in the driver's seat, right? It's a very different role. And so you get to just be like, well, where are we going? You know? And then it tells you, and then you're like, okay, let's go. And then you say yes. And so I think it's that process of inquiry and then trusting your intuition, no matter what it shows you, no matter how ridiculous, knowing that your intention is strong enough that you can just follow it and then play and allowing yourself to play and get inspired by what comes through. I hope that helps give you a little. I think going for walks. I think like that as soon as I get stuck on something, cleaning the kitchen. It's like I get more inspiration when I go for walks, clean the kitchen, and take drives. But yeah.
Thank you.
Hmm.
It's fun to be with everybody. Love to see what other questions and stuff people are bringing in. I can hang out for a while. So
Anyone else have questions? This is a brand new thing. I've never done open office hours before.
Mhm.
I just figured, it's like, why not? Just make some time to dig deep into whatever questions are coming up. Okay. Well, we could just say that we're complete. Oh, wait, there's questions. Um, yes, Laurel, there's a replay of the whole class, and it will go out fairly soon. So I'll make sure that you get that. You're welcome. Glad that you appreciated it. All right. If there's no more questions, I'm going to hang up. And thanks for playing with the open office hours and bringing your questions. Bye.
Mm. Oh.
Oh, wait.
Mm.
Yes. um, how did you come by the goddess Artemis name? So the way that this program came about was that I've been teaching online for a bunch of years and teaching the School of Sacred Storytelling. And the school isn't really meant to really take people to the stage. It's really designed to introduce you to storytelling, to yourself as a storyteller, and to help cultivate your skills. And I got to a point where there were people that were really ready to take their stories and perform them and give them away. And that's a different kind of class. That's a different kind of approach, um, and so to storytelling. And so I developed a course called the Performance Intensive, and that was for that first group. And they took their story to the stage, and they had such an extraordinary experience that the whole group came to me and they said, "Leah, we want the master's program because we want to keep doing it." And I said, okay. So that year we created a story ceremony, and that was that one that I described a little bit, where that was the story of Medea. And we really looked at the story that was really asking us as a culture to explore forgiveness, and how to do that in a group ceremony with 200 people, leading people on this initiatory path. It was so much fun, I can't tell you. And as I started to listen, in this time of COVID, it's been such a time of listening for what wants to happen in this time. I would say kind of like the PhD version showed up, the next level of saying, like, what does the earth really need from us right now? And it really does, I would say it's really calling for more and more of us to step into that place of leadership. But I feel like that place of leadership, all the pedestals are falling, right? Like, we are understanding that leadership shows up in so many different ways. In Pack of Wolves, leaders, the wolf is actually the guy at the back, or the girl at the back. Leadership is much more astute than that person in the front. And so this is a program that really gives you those skills. And when I kept listening, Artemis just kept showing up. And so I started to look at Artemis and be like, oh, right, she's our protector. She's a protector for those who can't protect themselves. And she's also that embodied being of masculine and feminine. And there's just something about what is emerging out of our times. And I thought, wow. And she's also the midwife, right? She's the one that's the she's making it possible for the new life to come forward. So it just seemed like the perfect archetypal energy to represent that program and its mission, that it's not just about storytelling, but it's really about showing up as storytellers, as conscious creators in our time, and really awake in a live way. So that's why she's there. And you're asking, does Artemis suggest a person should have already done a 4-week series with you? You do need to have taken a class with me because it is an advanced class. You need to be like up to speed in some of the basic practices. I generally say that you want to start with Sanctuary, or you could start with Mythos, but Artemis you definitely need some foundational class behind you. So if you do want to take that class, I would, in your feeling called Sanctuary, I'm going to give you the link again. You'll want to set up a time because it's by interview, and we can figure out all the details there. And of course, I don't have the link up anymore. Let's see if I can't find the link. There you go. Yeah. There we go. Here's the link. Yes, Celia. I love that. You're welcome, Sabine. She's still here. Hi, nice to see your name as always. Sabine, it's a new program. It's gone beyond Speak the Spark. It's definitely no repeating. God forbid we would do the same program over again. I can't do. I just get so excited with the evolution of it all that I just keep, the program just keep evolving with me. So, all right. Okay, if those are all the questions, no, I really will say adieu and talk soon. Okay, bye-bye.